staff. Today's savings plan for public safety impacts six public safety budgets. Not all are impacted. The total savings that are proposed for this is $5.7 million. Council staff's making a recommendation for a small reduction of that savings within the Department of Correction and Rehabilitation, which we'll get to shortly. But I just wanted to point out a couple of charts in your packet. The first one showing which circle number each agency's information is on, the amount of the executive's recommended reduction, the percentage of their approved appropriation for FY19, and there's a little more information on each of the items on page 2 that council staff thinks are manageable. It's manageable to take these cuts at this point without any significant impacts to operations. But we do have some discussion items that I'd like to bring to your attention, most significantly for correction rehabilitation, but there are also a couple for police and fire. So I was wondering if representatives from corrections could step forward just in case the committee has any questions. But I will go through these for you. Items 15, 16, and 18 are personnel cuts. They're abolishing a vacant security officer position at pretrial, abolishing a vacant maintenance officer position, and lapsing an administrative specialist 2. As members of the committee know that we've been dealing with cuts in corrections for a very long time, most significantly starting with the recession, and I've outlined all the different cuts that they've taken. That's impacted more than 50 positions for them. Some of these have been restored, and there have been efficiencies found within operations. Notably, I pointed out 2 of the least savings items that they have achieved, which are ongoing annual savings. But some of these cuts have caused some security concerns, like at a visitor post. When they collapsed the visitor post, there was more fighting among people who were visiting, that type of thing, so it caused more security concerns. So the council has addressed those as they have come up. I wanted to point out that the lapse is pretty significant for corrections in FY19. The approved operating budget assumes about 2.65 million lapse. That's about 4% of the total budget, or 4.5% of the personnel budget. At the time that the operating budget was reviewed back in the spring, corrections had 47 vacancies, of which 37 were in the process of being filled. They currently have 48 positions vacant, of which 25 are in the process of being filled. I'm very reluctant to make actual cuts abolishing positions, and for those reasons I'm asking that the committee consider not abolishing items 15 and 16, the vacant security officer position and the vacant maintenance officer position, because once we abolish them, it's very difficult to get them back. If the committee doesn't want to take all the savings or reduce the savings as much as I'm recommending, the lapsing the administrative specialist 2 is not as critical. It's not a frontline security and safety position, and we can address that back in FY20 as it comes up. So I'm recommending that those not be accepted as part of the corrections savings plan.
So I understand the 204, 460 figure, that does not include the 41,902, or it does?
It does include that. I'm recommending that you not take that, but if you don't feel comfortable with that and you want to see more savings achieved, that's the one I'm offering up.
Well, I have great concerns about taking anything from corrections. I mean, and Susan, you did a great job on the packet, as you always do, but if you go back to fiscal year 08 and you look at where we are today, I mean, for the full-time equivalents, we have close to less than 100 people in these positions, and that's not a wise thing for us to continue. So as far as I'm concerned, I mean, if my colleagues want to go with the 41,902, I could live with that, but I believe that we should not do any of it. We should keep exactly what you're suggesting, the 204, 460, to not have it. So you agree, or you?
Yes, I did have a question.
Okay, a question, please.
Hello, Director Green. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure seeing you on this side of the aisle, and I really do greatly appreciate and respect the work that you guys do. I know how critically important it is, and I've seen it with my own 2 eyes, and your dedication and progressive commitment to ensuring full rehabilitation and the support services that you provide are outstanding. I did have a question with regards to the reason why these positions were vacant to begin with. Is that in relation to the challenges other departments have been having as well in terms of getting people on board through the hiring process? And are you experiencing that with other positions within the department?
Yes. is the direct answer. Yeah, recruitment is difficult in the public safety field. People that want to work the 24/7, weekends and holidays off, that's a difficult sell these days. We've had people tell us that, you know, I'll take a different position, maybe to work Monday through Friday, 8 to 4. So it's difficult recruitment. Tough positions to fill because of the background, the expectation of what we do when you're giving someone the ability to exert authority over another human being. That being said, I think we had a perfect storm of a couple of things. We got behind on some recruitment in 16, where some positions under the Richmond decision, and we've just not been able to catch up. It's difficult to fill the positions, and one day lost in the recruitment process for us, especially in a correctional officer, resident supervisor position, nursing position, those are all backfill over time. So if we're lapsing straight salary, we're backfilling time and a half, and we've just, for multiple reasons, not been real successful at recruitment. And I'm really pleased. I think in our new administration, our CAO and our county executive are looking at all of those things to bring people on to our department, our county, as quickly as possible.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? If not, before we, I would like to have everyone please introduce themselves who's sitting at the panel, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Angela Talley. I'm the Division Chief for Community Corrections. I oversee the pretrial services programs and also pre-release and reentry services.
Good afternoon. I'm Shelford Gilliam. I'm Deputy Warden of Customs Security at the Montgomery County Correctional Facility.
Afternoon, I'm Tony Sturgis. I'm the Chief of Medical and Behavioral Health Services, responsible for all the health services in the department.
Please.
Brady Goldsmith, OMB.
Thank you very much. Any questions of this? No? Thank you very much. We're going to approve just the way you said it, please.
Corrections, okay.
Thank you.
The next item up we have is police. I'm recommending approval of all of these cuts, but some of them are significant, and they're also dealing with some operational issues that we might need a little bit more clarity on. The first one is increasing lapse by about 2.7 million. This would increase total FY19 lapse from about 6.4 million up to 9 million in lapse. The proposed total lapse increases or represents about 3.2% of the entire budget, 3.2% of the entire budget, and 3.9% of the personnel budget. The executive has advised that the operational impact should be minimal. If necessary, the department can delay hiring a small number of civilian positions that have a lesser impact on critical functions. I'm recommending approval of this reduction. The next item, 46, is reducing current year encumbrances for about $435,000, and there's a total list of that on Circle 8. There is one item, AT&T's Next Generation 911, which reflects a savings of about $422,000, and that's resulting from an implementation delay from December to April. The committee might want to ask questions to get a little bit more clarification on this, whether or not this delay was due to natural operational issues that are ongoing, or was it purposely delayed for savings?
Okay. There again, I'm certainly not happy about any of these reductions, and of course, we're going to have to deal with this for the next budget. But if the panel could please introduce themselves, please.
Good afternoon, Russ Hamill, Assistant Chief for the County Police Department.
Neil Shore, Director of Management and Budget, Division of Police.
Rich Harris, Office Management and Budget.
But unless there's questions, I'm reluctantly okay with all the suggestions that are being made. As I say, we need to think about this for next budget, but for the moment, we have to come up with some savings. Are you? Go ahead.
And that's,
Wait, Tom, do you have some?
Yeah, two quick questions. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman. Hey, Russ. Well, one question, car seat checks and installations. Don't you guys do those? No, I know, it's in the packet, it's you, but when I had my car seat checked, it was by your staff. Is that?
It's primarily fire rescue.
Was that going
We do our
rogue?
best to help
Okay.
the community safe,
Were you
especially the
being-
little ones.
My kids have been unsafe all this time, apparently. All right.
No, we know how,
At the time when they checked it?
No, yeah. We're not going to
well,
go there.
frankly, when I was in the car seat stage, I had the fire rescue guys check it. I'm kidding, I know we're on camera.
All right, good to know. So I'll ask that question in a minute. The other thing, just in the county exec's overall approach to the savings plan, why do we use a savings plan to abolish positions rather than just to lapse them? I mean, the council obviously thought those positions were worthy and put it in the budget for a reason. We could just be lapsing them now to achieve the same savings, correct?
That is correct, but I think in this particular case, what we had is we had some vacancies in two Security Service Division positions, and one of the things that we have been doing over a period of time, and I believe the last time we did this, I think was 2 years ago, maybe even last year, is that we actually abolished 6 long-standing vacant positions last year as a cost savings measure and used contract services to take the place of that. And that was intended to be a cost savings measure. So I believe that that's the rationale for doing it here as part of this savings plan, is we had 2 vacancies. We were able to take contract services to take the place of those 2 vacancies. So there's no actual reduction in terms of coverage by the Security Services Division, but at the same time, we're saving money.
Okay, so I understand this is sort of a one-off approach to this particular need and isn't an overall approach to the budget. Is that right, Rich? Fair to say that? Okay. Thank you.
To that question, can we get an answer how much we're actually saving by doing exactly what was being done, not just from this department, but others, when you do away with a position but hire a contract position? I'd like to know really how much we're actually saving or not saving when we do that.
Yeah, me too.
And please.
Oh, thanks. I do want to ask about the implementation of Next Gen 911. Was that due to contracting issues or?
It was issues in the contracting and not in cost saving. We did not put off Next Gen 911.
And
to
we'll
save
hear
costs.
about that later
Yeah.
today. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Okay? Any,
Well, that's it for police.
are you all, are both of you okay
Yes.
with the? Okay,
Reluctantly.
yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The next one is fire and rescue. They've got 2 items that are up for reduction: reducing overtime in support services and operations for savings of, I shouldn't say that, they've got several. The ones I wanted to talk about were reducing overtime in support services and operations for $534,000 and improvements in disability retirement processing for about $757,000. Fire and Rescue has had many significantly large savings plans proposed or cuts in the operating budgets that you've seen come across the street for the past 2 or 3 years now. What has been proposed in this item is much, much lower. According to Fire and Rescue, both of these items reflect a current practice. When the executive transmitted the FY19 Fire and Rescue savings actions back in September, his transmittal memo had indicated that he had authorized Fire and Rescue to make some personnel decisions that minimize overtime usage and contractual overspending in non-frontline and support functions, and these are several that have been chosen by the fire department to do. The support services and operations deal with non-frontline operations such as overtime spent on tool repair, medical supply distribution, other technology upgrades, that type of thing. The improvements to disability retirement processing, we also discussed a little bit the last time we looked at the savings actions in the fall. This helps find some efficiencies in the disability retirement process that helps speed them up so you don't have to backfill with overtime for as long. And I'm recommending approval of all of these.
And if the panel could please introduce yourselves.
Good morning, Scott Goldstein, Fire Chief.
Dominic Del Pozo, Fiscal Management Division Chief.
Bruce Meyer, OMB.
Thank you. And we're saying that this reflects the current practice, and so I guess there again, it's a reluctant go along with it, but I am concerned, though it is, as you say, much less than what we've had to wrestle with before, and I think the county executive understood, since when he was sitting in this chair, he wrestled, and therefore he knows what we're dealing with.
Right. That's the other thing, as we mentioned before, the chief had mentioned that there is a cost of service study that they had asked for. I believe it's in a draft form. It's not ready for public use yet at this point, but we will be keeping an eye on that and try to bring that over before the committee as soon as it's ready. So I'm hoping that'll come over before operating budget deliberations.
Okay. Chief, did you have anything to?
As Mr. Hucker, your question, and I do appreciate Russ always letting the fire rescue technicians install his kids' car seats. The car seat safety program started off many years ago in consumer protection, transitioned also many years ago to fire rescue, and the program is managed by a fire rescue civilian staff member, but it is staffed with or performed by a large group of folks, both fire rescue, civilian, and administrative personnel throughout the county government who are interested in being car seat technicians. So when you go to a Fitzgerald event or an event at Station 34 in East Germantown, or any of the other drop-in events that we do, it could be a person from HHS, it could be a fire person. The adjustment that we implemented, as you see on Circle 9 in line 64, which is that savings, was the reduction of uniformed overtime personnel being involved in the program, utilizing more of our partners as well as more of our volunteer members in the program. So still all the car seat checks are being performed. We're still every Wednesday at Station 34 in East Germantown, engaging with Fitzgerald as well as other activities in the Aspen Hill Old Station 25 area.
Okay, yeah.
You good?
Thanks for answering that question. I know it's not a lot, but so it'll continue. The reduction in overtime that we've wrestled with for years, we are all for it, but know there are trade-offs. Is it your view that will that have any impact on response times?
These actions, line 63, does not have an impact on response time. This is where we have been and still are utilizing firefighters on overtime in support roles and functions. It does impact the speed by which we're doing changes within our organizations, the speed by which we're implementing technology upgrades, but it is an adjustment that is necessary, as well as one that can be engaged to support the executive and engage that we still have response times as we wish.
Okay. Thank you. And can you talk a little bit about the realized EEO efficiencies?
So we have a broad number of outreach activities, including one that I believe you were very touched with and very close with. As we deal with our different outreach activities, the number and the frequency of those, we had to adjust and make sure that we were sending folks to. And so the line 61 and 60 and 61 are two adjustments there. We're still engaged in all the mentoring programs. We're still engaged in the community outreach and community education programs as you've seen. It's just we're adjusting, trying to send more on-duty apparatus and on-duty personnel versus less off-duty on overtime, and prioritizing those events. But we're still engaged with them to the same level, just making our use of personnel to a better extent.
Gotcha. So safe to assume we'd be looking for those kind of efficiencies even if we didn't have a savings plan?
Again, these events or these adjustments implemented back in the April timeframe.
Right. Okay.
And we did as an internalized process.
Very helpful. Thank you.
Okay. No? Are we okay with that?
We're reluctantly supporting.
We are reluctantly supporting. Thank you very much. And is that everything on that? Is that everything now? Susan, that covers everything for this? Thank you very much. The next item that we have is we're going to ask Amanda Myhill to please join us. And this is going to be discussing Bill 3118, New Home Warranty and Builder Licensing Amendments. I'd like to invite Eric Friedman and Aaron Ashbury. Eric is the Director of the Office of Consumer Protection. Aaron Ashbury is the Office of the County Attorney. Please join us.
Aaron's not here today.
Thank you.
I thought she was going to be here, but
Do we have any position from the realtor?
No, she's not, okay.
From the realtor or something? No.
And Amanda, if you would like to please walk us through it.
Sure. As you mentioned, this is Bill 3118, which essentially basically rewrites Chapter 31C, which is the new home warranty and builder licensing. The council held a public hearing, as we do with all bills, on October 9th, and the lone speaker was Mr. Friedman.
Wow.
There we
I listened to every word, Eric. I heard every word, yeah.
Yeah, wasn't that great?
Yeah, yeah.
So the lone speaker at the public hearing was Mr. Friedman, who testified in support of the bill on behalf of the then county executive, Mr. Leggett. We haven't heard a position from Mr. Elrich yet. The only other testimony that the council received on this bill, I actually just handed out. It came in after the packet went to print, and that's from the Building Industry Association, and they are in support of the bill. There are 4 items on, that I've identified in the packet that just helps you understand what the bill does. I will note that it is a complete rewrite, so we basically removed all the provisions of the current law and then redrafted it so that it was easier for council members to see. The main goal that Bill 3118 accomplishes is to address business model changes in the industry. This is, like I said, one of the most important things that this bill does. Mr. Friedman can certainly walk through in more detail the business practices, but essentially when 31C was enacted, it was basically a builder and who also sold the house, and so it was easy to identify the entity that provides the new home warranty. That's not the case now. Often the builder is building the home and then a different company is established for the purpose of selling the house, and then that entity essentially just disbands. And so the goal of this bill really is to ensure that a consumer who spends a significant amount of money on their home is able to get a warranty from the appropriate parties. And so that is, I can either stop at the end of each section or just walk through it and see if.
Please walk through.
Okay, so the second thing that Bill 3118 seeks to accomplish is to really clarify the procedures for reviewing home builder registration applications and the procedures and basis for revoking registration. There was a bit of ambiguity in the law in terms of whether or not, how permits and licenses are renewed and what can be, when a building or when a registration can be revoked. And so we've really cleaned up and clarified those provisions. The bill also ensures that building permits that are issued by DPS to new home builders, if someone wants to build their own house as opposed to using a new home builder, and the provisions that are in the bill are to ensure that there's no fraud there, that really it is the person that is going to be living in that house is the person that is not getting that permit.
Can I ask on that one, is there a timeline that says how long that person who's built that house has to live in there before they can sell it? I mean, somebody could say that they've lived in there for a month. Does that mean that that's allowed?
Mr. Scott, there is no specific timeline in the statute. It's a very good question. And when we work on the executive regulations, perhaps we can, zero and drill down a little bit further. It's certainly a point that we need to look at. But there are situations when we have currently applicants at the Department of Permitting Services that apply for 4 building permits on the same day, each time saying that they're building the house to live in.
Right.
So in that situation, it's pretty clearly false information that's being given to the county. But in terms of trying to circumvent the law by moving in for a month or something, that becomes a little bit problematic. But most of the problems that we're seeing are so grossly violated, where someone applies for the 4 permits at the same time or lists the property for sale at the exact same time that they're pulling the permit.
Right.
That we think we can address the majority of the violations.
Okay.
The last thing that I would just note is this bill, we really took the opportunity to just clean it up and remove outdated references to provisions of the law that aren't even in effect anymore, and also to make changes that establish greater uniformity with the state home builder registration law, which was enacted well after Chapter 31C. There's a staff amendment that's on circles 40 to 43 that are intended to address some issues that were raised from the Office of the County Attorney. Most of them are really not of consequence. The two most significant changes are to remove language regarding service of process and notice of hearing. The bill would essentially rely on the Administrative Procedures Act, which requires certified mail or personal service, and there was just a bit of confusion in there, so we made those changes. The other significant change from the regarding the staff amendment is removing language regarding the builder and seller being jointly and severally liable to the homeowner for the warranty. And that raised some concerns with the Office of the County Attorney. So instead, we've drafted it such that, and in order, as a condition to being registered under the chapter, the seller and the builder both have to agree to provide this warranty. So in that way, we've addressed the issue. The lead sponsor of Bill
You're
3118.
saying they would both have to agree between themselves who's going to do the
No,
warranty?
in order to be registered under this bill, they would have to provide the warranty to the consumer, not.
I see.
They don't have to decide amongst each other, they both have to.
I got you.
Be willing to provide it. The lead sponsor of of Bill 3118 supports the staff amendments.
Okay.
And so it's the council staff recommendation to enact the bill with the staff amendment.
And I'm fine with the enact a bill with the staff amendments.
Yeah, me as well.
And you?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Unless you had something to add, unless you want to change your testimony here.
Based on your decision, I have
Oh, there you go, very smooth. Okay, thank you very much. Thanks. Next item that we have, Mr. Keith Levchenko is going to explain the Montgomery County Hazard Mitigation Plan to us.
We have some folks from the Office of Emergency Management and Homeland Security working their way up to the table.
They don't really do new homes. Good evening. Good afternoon. If you would please introduce yourselves.
Earl Stoddard, Director of the Office of Emergency Management and Homeland Security.
Mary Ann Souders, Planning Division Chief.
Michael Baldosser, Emergency Management Specialist.
Thank you very much. Keith, if you could please walk us through it.
Yes, the office actually does a lot of different planning efforts. In fact, last year, the prior council approved the latest rendition of the Emergency Operation Plan. This time around, we have the draft Hazard Mitigation Plan before the council. As you can expect, emergency planning is a good thing to do anyway, but in this case, we also do have a stick in that we need to have a current plan in place in order to be eligible for emergency-related grants from FEMA. So that certainly hangs over our heads as well to encourage us to do this effort. The last plan was approved in 2013 by the council and I believe adopted by FEMA in 2014, and there's a 5-year window before you get your next plan in. And so this is actually due coming up in mid-February, and that's why the urgency of getting it introduced at the first council session and having it come before the committee so that we can actually have it out the door in time, so there's no gap in plans, if you will. But with that said, it is a pretty extensive planning effort, and we do have staff here that can speak to that. The only thing I would add is, other than some technical edits and corrections that staff has conveyed to the office, staff does not recommend any, or does not feel that we need to have an intense policy discussion here. The plan is well vetted with the public and with our participating agencies and municipalities. So there's a lot of back and forth, not just during this planning process, but throughout the emergency management efforts that we go throughout the year. A lot of the same actors are involved. So there's not really a downtime, if you will, on that. So by the time it comes to us, it's been through such a vetting process that we generally don't have a lot to add at this point. And I don't want to belabor that, but I think it is helpful for the committee to understand the purpose of the plan, what some of the highlights of this plan are in terms of changes from the prior plan, and what are some of the issues going forward. One of the things this does identify, it identifies the major hazards and which ones are more likely, less likely to occur, and therefore should be of higher interest, and with higher interest in pursuing mitigation efforts. Those mitigation efforts often have a budgetary impact associated with them. And they can come back to the council in that form at some point through a department budget request. So it's important that those be identified in here for us, and then also, as I mentioned earlier, for FEMA, to the degree we can seek funding that way. So with that, I'll turn it over to OAMHS to provide a summary of this and answer any questions you have.
Thank you very much. Please.
Thank you, Mr. Levchenko, and thank you, members of the County Council Public Safety Committee. As Mr. Levchenko suggested, this is a routine plan that we're required to maintain. He certainly mentioned the grant eligibility as being critically important, but also having a current hazard mitigation plan is a requirement of federal reimbursement after disaster. And so we did not want to have a lapse in this plan because obviously that puts us at great liability. We had the snowstorm a number of years ago in 2016. We ended up getting nearly $12 million back. I don't want to miss an opportunity like that should something happen during.
Let's not have the snow.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, by
exactly.
the way.
So the intention of this plan is really to take a routine and regular review of the hazards posed to Montgomery County, understand the changes in our risk profile as well as our changes in preparedness, which influence how well we're prepared to respond to these events. Furthermore, it's our best opportunity to engage with the municipalities, all 19 towns, cities across the entire county, to get their feedback and engagement upon things that they see as risks within their own communities. And as Mr. Levchenko suggested, we also use these identified projects as they come out as opportunities to seek grant funding for the municipalities particularly, but also for the county as well, to address some of the issues identified therein. I think it's really important that we maintain these kinds of planning efforts because they help us have a long-term strategy around natural hazards. Now, I do want to highlight one major thing that came up in a lot of our discussions as it relates to this planning effort, and that's climate change. Climate change is not a natural hazard as recognized by FEMA. We around the room all and throughout the county recognize that it is a natural hazard that we should be considering. We did not believe that as part of the process that we had engaged in over the year, we were going to be able to do justice to the issue of climate change. But we did want to have a long-term strategic commitment to doing it. So upon completion of this plan, one of our next immediate steps that we've already discussed internally and with DEP and other programs throughout the county is to begin a climate change study to understand the impacts of climate change. What we've recognized, and the council has as well, is that reducing our carbon footprint is critical to reducing the potential impacts of climate change, but the science is pretty clear. We are going to see the impacts of climate change whether we do anything today or not. And so we're trying to understand what that means for the county, what that means for our drought risk, what that means for our flood risks, whether that means that we should be planning in a different way, whether that means a 500-year flood is now a 100-year flood. We want to do some modeling and some analysis in that area to understand what that's going to mean for the long-term risk for the county. And so that's going to be one of the major efforts that I don't want to say started with this plan because we had known it was an issue, but it came up so often in this planning effort that we knew that it needed to be a standalone effort on its own. And I'll just give a few minutes to, so Michael Baldoser is here from our team, along with Marianne Souders. They spearheaded this effort, and I want to give them an opportunity to sort of talk about a few of the projects, the key projects that were identified as new projects for the 2018 hazard mitigation update.
Please.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. Thank you. One of the, I think, improvements that we made in this iteration of the plan is we spent about a month going out and actually face-to-face with all the municipalities, getting their concerns, we need to know their capabilities and how much they rely on the county. And as you're very well aware, the county is extremely diverse, from those that are completely self-sufficient to those that rely on the county for everything. A number of the issues that came up continually, they will go hand in hand with what Earl was just saying, is stormwater management. One of the grants that is available from FEMA is stormwater management studies, engineering, and improvements. That came up in a number of the municipalities. As Earl said, climate change was one of their main concerns. So by going out and talking to the municipalities, not only were we able to get their concerns, but a lot of them, especially the smaller ones, were unaware of some of these grant opportunities. So they're now much more aware of, oh, we can put a generator in our town hall, which is our EOC essentially. So it's making them much more aware of some of the potential projects that we can fund through FEMA.
All right, so every municipality would be, I'm asking rather than saying here, but every municipality would be under this plan? No individual municipality would have their own plan as well?
They all adopt this as their plan as well. That's part of the requirement.
Okay.
And actually, to become eligible for the funding, they have to adopt the plan.
Right.
And that goes for the pre-disaster mitigation funds as well as the post-disaster funding. So if they don't sign on the dotted line, they aren't even eligible for the funding.
Okay. Thank you. Please, did you have something to add?
I turn all over to Mike. He's
Wow, okay.
done a wonderful job on this.
We agree with you,
Here
candidly.
to crack the whip.
We're in agreement. Are you? Any questions?
Keep hitting, punching it the wrong way. Out of practice here. This is very helpful. Regarding the subsequent climate change plan, are you getting any coordination from or guidance from MEMA on that topic? I mean, years ago, I was at one of their conferences under the previous governor, where they brought in every agency to talk about the impact on Maryland, third most vulnerable state. I haven't seen very much lately, though.
Yeah, so one thing that did sort of is a legacy of the previous administration federally is that there was a large project started through FEMA, the National Association of Climate Change Officers, where Maryland was one of 5 states identified for a pilot program to really do an in-depth study of climate change and its impacts. Obviously, the Bay is a primary concern, particularly at the state level, but there are concerns with the Potomac watershed and other sort of natural resources in Montgomery County. And so I know that I've been invited to participate in a statewide forum in 2 weeks on this issue, particularly as it relates to the impacts of critical infrastructure and climate change. And so,
And it's held by MEMA?
so they're coordinated. So this is a MEMA plus MDE plus association conference essentially being put on.
Okay.
It's jointly being put on. We had the director of MEMA down in Montgomery County this morning. So we talked about this as an issue. He's a supporter of this premise. Look, Montgomery County is going to be a leader on this issue, and we recognize that. There are jurisdictions around the state that either don't have the resources to look at this issue in depthly as we do, or haven't recognized it as the immediate concern that we have here in Montgomery County. It's such a, through the resolution that you all put forward about the climate change emergency, we want to recognize that as being a huge driver for us to get involved, or more involved than we have been. And so, I think we're going to be a leader on this issue, and I don't want to say we're going to be dragging MEMA along on this. I think there is some support there, but we're more forward-thinking on this issue than the state is in some cases.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's as far as I'll go.
All right, enough said. Thank you.
Dave, did you have anything to?
No, great presentation.
Okay. And nothing else, then we're approving it. Thank you very much. All right, so for the timeline, so that everybody, there is no gap, does this come back when to the full council?
Council action is tentatively scheduled for the 29th of January. It's by resolution, and then we hand it back to OEMHS to get all the signatures and actually formally submit it.
And that gives us enough time to do this?
I will note that the federal shutdown is having an impact on this.
Yeah, we did mention that
yes.
that's creating a little wrinkle in this because FEMA is, short-staffed, if you will. So the review process is sort of turned around a bit. We would normally like to have gone through FEMA and then back to the council. But in this case, we had to get it through the council to meet our deadline and then let FEMA deal with it when they can.
I did not want to leave any ambiguity for the federal government to penalize us.
Right.
Because of something like that.
My only question candidly
Yeah,
is
we
whether
will
we
be
should
okay.
push, whether it should be on next week's agenda, but obviously it's not going to matter, I guess.
No, I think we're fine in terms of our deadline on the 29th, plus to the degree we find, any other technical corrections or other things like that we need to work on, it's always better to have a little bit of time after committee.
Okay, as long as you're comfortable. Thank you all very much for all your hard work on this. And the last item is Susan Farag is going to give us and others are going to give us an update on the Emergency Communications Center. If we could please invite the panel. I think we have 5 or 6 people who are supposed to join us.
Best we got.
Yeah. If the panel could please introduce themselves.
Good afternoon once again, Russ Hamill, Assistant Chief of Police.
John Kinsley, the Operations Chief for Fire and Rescue.
Bill Ferretti, the Director for the 911 Center.
Eric Stancliffe, I'm currently the Acting Project Manager for ECC Consolidation.
Thank you all for being here. Susan, did you want to start us off, please?
Sure, I wanted to give a brief overview of the ECC, just to get us all on the same page. And then there are a lot of complex moving parts. It's been undergoing a consolidation process for several years now. So I'm going to just set the stage for that. We've got some updates on staffing and also some state legislation that has been proposed. And of course, the Next Gen 911 and what that means for the public. So I'm just going to briefly give you a background as I walk through the packet. As you know, the ECC answers all the 911 calls dialed in this county, as well as non-emergency police calls. The infrastructure and the operational models that we have changed over the past several years, and that's part of the ECC consolidation project. Initially, when a 911 call was placed, it was placed on a landline, and that was directed to a local public safety answering point, which is the technical term for our 911 call center. It's the answer and the dispatch function is a bifurcated model with separate police department and fire and rescue service call takers. So what would happen is if somebody called into the center, a police call taker would answer it. They would ask if it's for police, fire, or medical assistance. If it's police, it stays on the police side of call taking. And if it's fire or medical assistance, it was sent to a fire call taker. So you have two different sets of call takers, and then you have two different sets of call dispatchers, fire and police. So a little bit complex, and the ECC, the police and the fire decided that maybe a universal call taker model would be a more appropriate model. That was back in FY11, I believe, or maybe FY13, to move to that. And they would combine and they would cross-train all the call takers so that all calls could be processed without that need for that second transfer step. This transition was delayed in 2013 due to some difficulties with implementing the call-taking protocol software. They have different softwares that go through a series of questions that they ask the person who's been calling so that they can appropriately direct the call. At the same time, the executive branch began to reevaluate how to move forward, and they decided at that point that they needed to pause and reassess how to best address several interrelated components that were affecting the ECC operations. And so the majority of these, or the largest components of these, were updating the call-taking protocol, implementing components of the PSSM, or the Public Safety System Modernization, which included the computer-aided dispatch, also addressing staffing shortages, and also civilianizing fire and rescue staff. They had sworn fire employees that were doing the call dispatch, and they thought that it would be better at this point to plan out the ECC consolidation, move the entire operation functionally under the police department with fire and rescue input, and that all the civilian staff would become police department civilian staff paid for under the police budget. I've outlined the major investments that we've had since FY15 on pages 2 and 3. They have done a lot. I mean, there are a lot of moving parts at this point. Staffing is a huge issue, and we have an update on that. They've had a lot of vacancies. It has a high turnover. It's a very stressful, high-pressure job, and people get burned out. There's also a lot of structural issues with staffing. They have a 30-year retirement as opposed to other public safety people who have 20 years. So you imagine a high stressful position for 30 years before you can retire. The pay was a little bit all over the place, not necessarily as good as other places in the surrounding jurisdictions. At least one of these items has been taken care of. They created a new classification series, the public safety systems. Thank you very much. And that has it has a reward built in for this additional training that they're doing, as well as outlined ways to get promoted to a certain level. I also have a timeline of all these different changes that have been going on since 2011 on page 3 for you. As you also know, the council approved a supplemental appropriation for additional funds in the CIP to purchase the leased space in Gaithersburg, which is the main public safety communications center. As you know, we have two. One is right here in Rockville. That's the backup, although they're supposed to be functionally identical at this point. But I just wanted to let you know about that. As for an update for the CIP, It includes about $17.6 million for the purchase of the property, as well as upgrades for HVAC, backup power supplies, and building security. The first phase of battery placement has been completed, and it's in operation. The second phase is to increase backup capacity from 60 minutes to 3.5 hours, and that work's scheduled for installation on January 23rd and 24th. And I think this is something that merits some additional discussion. As you know, we've had two major operational failures at the ECC since I've been here, at least one in 2011, where they had like massive calls coming in during a snowstorm that caused, I believe, a trunk to shut down, and they were unable to answer mobile phones for quite a while. And the second one was in 2016, and that was a air conditioner failed and systems overheated and stopped working. So that's something that was addressed through a continuity of operations plan, and I just think it would be better to get some additional detail on the work that's going on for these upgrades. I do want to jump to Next Gen 911. As you know, this will be able to process all call types, including voice, text to 911, crash notification, as well as receive images and video, and it'll provide improved location accuracy that will allow emergency personnel to send help more quickly. The county's been working with the state and the Metropolitan DC COG to transition to Next Gen 911, and they've contracted with AT&T to provide these core services. The transition from the legacy 911 network over to the new one will take place this year. The county continues to work with the state through the with AT&T to implement the interim text to 911 solution in 2019, and the full text solution is still under development. Staffing, as I had mentioned earlier, the ECC upstaffed several years ago to allow for new training requirements. You've got the problem with how intense the staffing is, how much on-the-job training they have, the limits of the physical location. You know, how many call centers can they actually sit at and get trained while people are actually performing their function and serving the public. So there are a lot of complex moving parts, so it's taken a long time. They can speak to that too if you have any additional questions. They indicated that the ECC's attrition rate has averaged about 15% over the past 5 years. It is a problem both here and nationally, basically, to find and retain qualified applicants. And the ECC is currently exploring an initiative with Montgomery College for the development of a certificate program for 911 professionals. One of the things that council members are often interested in is the call taking times, and there's some more information about that on pages 5, and, well, just 5. I'm sorry.
Circle 6.
Yes. The charts show reductions in answering times and processing times, but there was a small increase in average time necessary for a dispatcher to dispatch police priority incidents. In 2016, the average time required was 50 seconds. This spiked to 63 seconds in 2017, but it's now fallen back down to 57 seconds in 2018. 911 operations are funded in part by the 911 surcharge. That's comprised of 2 separate fees that help offset local and state 911 related capital and operating costs. For each dollar charged, 25 cents are deposited into the trust fund allocated to the State Emergency Number Systems Board, and the remaining 75 cents comes to the county. For prepaid phones, the fee is 60 cents, and that's divided by the same proportion between state and local. In FY18, the county received $7.7 million for that. That's an increase from $7.3 million in FY17, and that right now covers about 37.5% of allowable 9/11 expenses. There's legislation outlined on page 6 for you. 2 recent state laws impact 9/11. Senate Bill 1053, which was effective in June of last year, amends the property tax code, which allows the county to grant certain property tax credits to 911 public safety telecommunicators. The county has not yet acted on this legislation to amend county code. Thought that might be something that the council would like to look at in more depth. Senate Bill 285, also effective last June, establishes the Commission to Advance Next Gen 911 across Maryland for a term of 2 years, and that required reports to the governor last December and the upcoming December. Mr. Ferretti here is chair of the Technology and the Cybersecurity Subcommittee for that commission. They issued their report in November, and it had 23 recommendations, 10 of which have been identified as requiring legislative action. Those recommendations will form the backbone for 911-related legislation in the current session down in Annapolis. And based on the recommendations, the legislation will likely introduce things like updating the fee structure, standards for 9/11 records retention, training, cybersecurity, service provider liability concerns, recognition of the 911 specialists as members in the team of public safety personnel, and providing certain benefits parity for those specialists with other public safety personnel. Again, as I had mentioned before, it might be helpful to get an update on how the upgrades are proceeding in the 911 call center. And also, it would be helpful to understand, what is the public going to see on this transition to Next Gen 911? How's it going to affect the public, and how soon will that happen?
Thank you. Does anybody want to tackle what she's suggesting that you mention now, or do you want to wait? Go ahead.
Where would you like?
Go ahead, please, Bill. Yeah.
Well, why don't we start with the questions? First of all, the transition to Next Generation 911. That transition is being done in cooperation with the region, the COG, and the state. We initially hoped that we would see an implementation as early as this month, but as the project, it's a large project regionally, and the scope of it there's been some delays in the coordination between the AT&T services and the phone system equipment that we have in each of the local 911 centers. So that's what has brought the delays. We are still looking, we will be in 2019. We should know in the next 30 to 60 days a tighter time frame for that. What will
Is the state bringing any money at all in this deal? How's that going to work? I know that we're doing it in conjunction with, but.
So right now, under current law,
right,
we got two things from the state. First of all, our 911 phone equipment, which is Next Gen 911 ready, comes out of the trust fund. The second piece that comes out of the trust fund was the implementation costs or the capital costs associated with the conversion. But under the current law, the operating costs for those Next Gen 911 services, that is within the county budget and is offset by the 75-cent fee that comes to the county.
Okay.
In terms of what will the citizen expectation be? And the expectations are, this is not a waterfall or watershed moment where all of a sudden I can do X and tomorrow I can do everything. It's going to be an evolution over a series of years. The initial change will be an improvement in the routing of calls. And what I'm talking about is, as you know, and you've heard from your constituents who especially live down along the borders of the county, cell phone calls are routed today based on cell towers. So a call that standing in Montgomery County right on the border could be answered by Prince George's and necessitate a transfer. That transfer process can take a minute to a minute and a half. So the routing of calls under Next Generation 911 is based on the latitude and longitude or the actual location of the handset. So there's an improvement to the citizen experience right there. And again, on the backside, it's an improvement in response time because we're getting the information much faster. The second piece is what has been pulled out already, and you've started to see employed in the state, which is texting. So texting becomes available. Susan mentioned, and it's just key to note that it's being rolled out as the interim text to 911 solution. And the reason that is because today's text 911 solution across the country is based on consumer SMS texting. That is not public safety grade. There is no guaranteed delivery of those messages. Eventually, within Next Gen 911, we will see a transition from the consumer grade SMS to real-time texting, which will improve and get us that public safety grade reliability. Along with that is when we expect to see the pictures and video capability to be able to attach to those text messages. Will probably come as that part of the transition. Eventually, down the road, we'll start to see the integration of sensor technology, and also what I expect will may become the norm, which is video calling. I know as a parent and a grandparent, I communicate with my children using video calling as much as I do voice calling. I think that will become the norm a decade, 15 years from now, because I can both talk to 911, see 911, and show them what I'm seeing. And really that is the ultimate goal of Next Gen 911, to have 911 work for them as a communication tool, just in the same way they do in their everyday lives and communicating with each other.
Any idea when that's gonna actually happen? I mean, I know you don't have a crystal ball here, but.
I don't. There's a large partnership across government. The FCC is following it very closely, but it's really, it's all of the vendor community and the different states all moving together. And standards are there. The initial I3, what's known as the I3 standard for Next Gen exists, but it's not a standard that's not going to evolve. It's going to be an evolving standard. Because the goal of Next Gen, unlike legacy 911 that we've had for 50 years, it was not capable of evolving. It was based on a standard. And when cell phones came about, they were kind of forced into it. And voice over IP came about, it was kind of forced into it. The whole goal of Next Gen 911 being based on internet protocol technology is to allow it to have that flexibility that as new technologies get developed, we're able to implement them.
Go ahead.
Mr. Ferretti, how are you? Had the opportunity to visit the call center prior to the holidays. Thank you for the tour. My colleague, Councilmember Jawando, and I, and Councilmember Reamer had a representative there as well, and it was Senator Kagan who organized the visit. I was blown away by the dedication and the really impressive operation that we have here in Montgomery County. You mentioned the video calls, which is where we want to be, but you also stressed something as you were talking about that. We're already having a retention issue with staff, and the proposal of having video opportunities will create a mental health issue because there will be potentially extreme images that staff will have to be prepared to see on hand. And so I was just curious as to, both with Next Gen in general, how the staff training and how that may impact being able to operationalize so that as the technology is implemented, staff is ready to roll, and that they're supported in a way that makes sure that their own safety is taken under consideration in health and wellness.
Yeah, so thank you. And I'll kind of wrap that also into the attrition question that's coming up later. So there's no question that Next Generation 911 is going to have an impact on staffing in a number of different areas. On the front side, it's our text messages, video calls, are they going to take longer to process? In some respects, they might take shorter. A picture is worth 1,000 words. So in some areas, we might actually be able to speed up process. But the text conversation itself, as we all know just from our daily lives, takes a lot longer to have a conversation typing with our thumbs than it does to actually say things. So that may actually slow the process down. Unfortunately, because this is happening now across the country and no one's fully there, there's no benchmarking to say, well, yes, we know definitively these are the times. So we're definitely going to see some process times and potentially the need to increase staffing at the front end call taker. But the point you raise, Councilman, is so now this call taker who lives in an auditory world is now living in an auditory and visual world, and there are going to be additional, crisis type of issues, mental health crisis issues, because they're going to be exposed to things like they've never been exposed to things before, and we will see, no doubt, additional lost time in that, and we're going to have to adjust our staffing for that. But also, I think it means that we have to adjust our training to prepare them for that, but then also have the support services on the backside so that after they take that critical incident call, we can take them offline and have a professional there to basically decompress with them and work through what they just realized, and so to avoid the long-term consequences of that stress.
As a follow-up, the other thing I was impressed by is currently the ability to take calls for residents that speak English as a second language. And could you describe just briefly how that process will be transitioned as part of the next generation technology as well, and what the plan is for that?
Sure. So today there's two ways of dealing with foreign language translation. The first is like the counties around us. we have a very diverse population, and we hire from that population. So we have native speakers that are part of our staff, and they're compensated for that. So that is the best case scenario, right? So you don't need to get a third party to translate. In today's auditory world, most of them are able to do their own translation. If they're not, then we have a language language service that we connect with that does the audible translation. Now as we move into the written word, it's complicated for two reasons. Most of the staff that we certify as translators are certified in audio only, and many of them are not fluent in the written and writing. So we will need additional translation services. The struggle right now is a national struggle, and actually we are talking about this at the national level. We're talking about at the state level. Is how do you get a translator for text messaging? Right now, that is a gap in the technology. There's not a good solution in place yet. The overall message with texting in 911 is call if you can, text if you can't. This applies probably even more so at this point with foreign language. And one of the messages that will go to a texter in all cases is, as soon as the initial bounce back message to them, even though they've texted us, is if you can, please call. Please make that telephone call. Some of those initial messages, if they come in and we can't understand them, we are going to text back that they need to be in English or make that phone call. The dilemma across the country right now is looking at how do you solve the problem. Do you solve it through machine translation, which is a possibility, but that's still pretty, as a technology is in its infancy and is not foolproof, or do you solve it with the human? And so are the translation companies that exist out there that do audible translation, are they able to morph themselves into a position where they can do both written and oral translation? And so far, we have not seen, there's the DOJ, IGES, as part of DHS, under a grant program, has been studying this. And we are following that and participating in that to try to figure out what is that best solution. So there is a hole there.
All right, so just so I understand, so if somebody sends, eventually, when they can send, a picture to the communications center, will our police officers or first responders have equipment that you could send that picture to them, and how fast could that occur? I mean, not how fast can you get the equipment to them, but how fast would that picture go right to them?
So let me tie it all together.
Okay, all right, sure.
Because there's three pieces to response when it comes to data. On the front side, we have Next Generation 911, and that is the ability to get these multiple data types ingested into the 911 center. On the back end, we have the mobile data computer in the car, which is running the CAD software, and it currently communicates all across in the county. We use a commercial carrier, and that's our pipe to get the data to them. The FirstNet project nationally is the public safety equivalent of those commercial carriers, replacing the commercial carrier capabilities with some dedicated public safety broadband, large bandwidth capabilities, protected and prioritized for public safety. So that's the process, that's the pipe to get it out there. What sits in the middle is the computer-aided dispatch system. So we will take that, just like we do the phone number, if you will, the phone number and address information that we get from the phone system. We ingest that, it becomes part of the CAD record, and then that CAD record gets sent out to the mobile data computers. Pictures will just become, and to some degree the video will get annotated onto that and then sent out along with those, with the text information that goes today.
Good. Okay.
Going back to attrition for a minute, so attrition, as Susan mentioned, our attrition is 15%, an average over the past few years. Last year was a little bit lower than that. The national average, according to the group we're working with at the state, is about 17 to 19%. So we're doing a little bit better than the national. Around us, we are very comparable. when you look at the causes of why people leave, you have to look at it from two sides. First, it's the entry level. And then what about, once you have them in, you have them trained, are they staying? So on the entry level side, given the economy we are and a lot of the same issues that Warden Green or the Director Green mentioned around 24/7, mission critical, nights, weekends, holidays, recruiting is an issue. Our goal is right now through this period we've been attempting to hire 32 people a year, 4 classes of 8. We have a class starting next week with 6. It's not because we didn't want to have 8, it's because that's how many people got through the process that were qualified, that wanted to do the job. To that effort, we are teamed up with the college, with Montgomery College, looking at creating a certification course to try both as a recruiting tool and to improve our retention on the front end. And what I'm talking about there is the people that we hired, do they get through the training program? Do they make it through that first year? There was a point in our history where we were seeing 50% failure rates in training. We're doing better. We're down in the 20 and 25, 30%, but we'd still like to go even lower than that. So that, if you will, we're attacking that on the supply side. Now, once you have an employee in place, how do you keep them?
Sorry, how long was that training from beginning to end, from when you make the hire to when they're ready to roll?
To be both we hire communication specialists, public safety communication specialists, so it's approximately a year, half call taking, half learning a single dispatch discipline. And then there's additional training after that.
And what would the certification do for that person? Would that cut anything down at all, or?
The certification may, depending on how popular it is, some of the certifications that this course could offer could shorten our training a little bit. But really what it does for us, it guarantees, it helps that we know that this person really has an aptitude for the job, wants the job, understands what the training is going to look like. As part of that college program, we will bring them into the center for periods of time. So really, think about it almost like an internship to some degree, and I think we can improve the pool of candidates that we're choosing from.
Okay.
Sure. Do you lose, like so many of our professions, do you lose a lot of people who you've trained then to other jurisdictions that have similar needs but lower cost of living?
So that's where I'm going next, is so why do people leave once they're trained?
So while we're on the certification, my question was, while all of us are for workforce development certification in every field, could there be any unintended consequences of, if we have a certification program, other jurisdictions don't, we're training people, they start in then they'll, with that certificate, be more likely to be hired by another jurisdiction when we want to retain them?
So the certification as part of the college, I suspect, will act as a feeder for not just our county, but the counties around us. The ultimate goal of that program is to get that certification program in all of the community colleges throughout the state. Chesapeake College over on the shore is partnering with Montgomery College and trying to do something similar. So it's a joint effort. Today, once we get them in-house, we have not historically lost employees that have left our center to go to other local nearby centers.
Right.
We've had some that have located out of the area and have continued in with the profession, but there was other reasons they were leaving the area. We have benefited and actually gotten 1 or 2 employees from other counties. And that is one of the positives of our picture, is because we as a county, with support from the executive, from the council, have worked very hard to create a public safety career within the 911 center. There is still a debate going on when you hire a public safety communication specialist, is this a career in and of itself, or is it a gateway to other public safety careers? It can be looked at either way. I would prefer that it be looked at as a career unto itself, and it's really about our return on investment. We spend a year training somebody. How long do we want to keep them? Do we want to keep them 3 years, 5 years, 15 years, 20 years to get that return on that training? When I take that to the next step, so you look at our tenured employees and why do they leave? Well, there's good reason people leave, right? So the good reasons is because they get promoted. And so that's a good reason. The other reason is because they retire. And along those lines, on the floor of the 144 call taker dispatcher positions that exist today, 3 are still in the retirement system. And I'm talking about the defined benefit 30-year system that Susan mentioned. And this is where the county is at a disadvantage to some of our neighbors. Our public safety specialists, while considered part of the public safety chain, do not have all the same benefits as public safety, one of them being a defined benefit retirement. That was changed in 1994. So of those 3, potentially 2 of them are looking to retire this year, so I will have 1 person left. So at all the rest of your call takers and dispatchers, really hired since 1994, and a majority of the staff has less than 5 years' experience. The commission report, which I urge you strongly to read, and the link is in the packet, across the state, a majority of 911 staffs have been in place for less than a year. So what are the other reasons for turnover? And it's exactly the things that Director Green was talking about. It's do I really want to work these shift hours? The hours themselves are long. The stress is very high. I don't think pay is an issue for Montgomery County. I think we pay very well. But you also have to look at who we're competing against. In our space, the skill set that we're looking for is also very attractive to the federal government and to federal government contractors, specifically areas like Department of Homeland Security, that can apply that to an analytical skills. And so someone who does very well in our program for a few years can translate that into a 9 to 5 Monday through Friday job. And that is what's very hard to compete with. And right now, the issue as I see it is we don't have a barrier to exit. We're doing a very good job of getting them in, but not necessarily a good job of saying, hey, this is somewhere you want to be for 25 years.
Okay. Do you have any other?
I don't.
Okay. Go ahead, please.
I'll talk a little bit about the about the battery backup capability, just to answer that question really quick. So as part of the upgrade process, and really this was just a phase 1, phase 2, in the Public Safety Communications Center, the 3.5 hours battery is enough time. When we had an issue with the current battery strings that were in place, and we had to replace them. So we lost some capability as part of the transition. So really, the 3.5 hours is just restoring us back to where we were. So we've had a shorter period, an hour, for the past 2 or 3 months, waiting for the second set, and they're being installed in the next few weeks.
How do you arrive at that number? Why is it not 2.5 or 4.5?
Well, so the power continuum, and let's just talk about what the battery's job is. First of all, we obviously, where we are, we sit on the PEPCO grid, so PEPCO is our primary power. Next is where do we get our source of power from? It's the generators. And we have multiple generators, each of which can carry the load. The battery system is really designed as a bridge to move from commercial power to the generators. If there's a problem with the generators, you need the 3.5 hours does is it buys us the time to mitigate that, to get staff in place from DGS and the contractors to say, hey, you know, it is a simple fix before we have to pick up in a crisis and move our operations to the alternate center. We've done it, but obviously we'd prefer not to do it, because anytime you transition, you know, an operation, a live operation, there is a certain level of risk that goes with that. So if we can stay in place and provide the facility professionals a chance to mitigate the problem with the generator, we would prefer to do that. Our history over the last couple of years tells us that if that happens in the middle of the night, you need an hour just to get those people in place to be able to do that. And then you have to give them some time, roughly an hour, to do some basic troubleshooting and figure out, okay, what is it? And at that point, that still gives us a window to say, okay, they're unable to solve this. We can now move in an orderly fashion as opposed to running out the door. That is compared to our alternate center, which does not have that level of battery backup capability. It is much shorter, driven strictly by facility, what the facility can support in terms of space and weight of batteries.
So to the question, would we be wise to get more battery backup at the primary and get some backup for the auxiliary?
We do have battery backup at
More.
We are, at this point, and it's something I'll ask DGS to look at, but the issue is there's no place to put the batteries in the alternate. We are space constrained.
How long does it last in the alternate?
Anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour. If we are at the alternate and the power goes out, we will immediately move. We will immediately begin and move back to the primary. And again, that only happens when there's a failure of the generator plant. And again, just like at the PSEC, you're talking multiple failures because you have multiple generators.
Okay, please, go ahead. Did you have something?
Later.
Okay, go ahead, please.
I'll skip over question 3. That has more about facilities. See if DGS, I know Greg Assad from DGS is here, if he wants to come back to that at some point, if you want to get more information on that. Talking about next generation 911 and the storage capabilities of that, what is it going to require? Again, it's absolutely going to require additional storage. We started sizing for that, but again, we're taking shots in the dark at this point. We really don't know. And again, there's not enough history anywhere in the country to be able to gauge what that is. There's some numbers out there associated with body-worn cameras, but it's not the same. You can't make that same leap to those things. The good news is, storage space keeps getting cheaper. I've talked about the attrition rate.
Sorry, just as a follow-up to that, on the IT side, firewalls, IT security, is that a component of some additional layer of investment that's needed as part of the next generation transition? Is that, I know we discussed that when I took the tour, but if you could, for the benefit of my colleagues, talk a little bit about what that plan is.
Sure. So the good news about the legacy 911 network is an analog network. It's, in and of itself, and rather enclosed and not very open, so it was naturally protected. As we move to an IP-based system, an emergency services internet-based system, it is much more open and interconnected, not only to us but to all the other counties around us, and ultimately it will be a system of systems nationally. So it does present some opportunities for ill to happen. There's also some good that comes with it. IP-based tools are much better than the analog tools. So right out of the gate, we can actually block some traffic, for instance, from overseas, because someone calling from overseas, from country X, doesn't need 911 here. So we can automatically block those to begin with and not have to worry about that, which maybe some other industries can't do that. But we'll be looking at cybersecurity from 2 angles, and the state legislation is looking at adding some cybersecurity benchmarks and standards so that it's the same throughout the state, which is good for us in our county because it makes sure that all these interconnected networks are on the same level playing field when it comes to cyber. The EZINet provider itself and that contract and that provider has to have cybersecurity in place to protect that pipe coming into us. So that's part of the contract and it's part of our service level agreements with them. But then once it comes into our house, if you will, into our building, it has to come through firewalls. It has to be segmented. We have to be doing things that through the working with DTS and the security group to make sure that we are being proactive in monitoring our traffic and have the tools in place so that when we're getting bad traffic coming in. The the scary part for us, and this is something that we are still working on, what this is gonna look like. So a 911 call comes in, and it comes in with a picture. And you know, as hopefully it's been drilled in Austin County, and I think most people know now through as many problems as we have throughout the country, if you get an email from someone you don't know or a text message with an attachment, and you don't know who it's from, you don't open the attachment. We are not going to have that luxury. We don't know anybody who's calling us. So we are going to have to open those. So we are going to have to put processes in place to be able to open those in DMZs, if you will, protected zones, separate from our system to basically wall them off while we open them to make sure that they're okay. So we're aware of that. And that's where the industry is developing some best practices for how are we going to do these things. Thank you for the question. Cyber is a legitimate and very big concern of 911 as we move forward into next gen. And it's another area where there's going to probably be some cost implications and staffing. I don't see that most 911 centers will bring cyber experts in-house. I think most of it will be done at the contract level or as we do at the county level, just from the economies of scale. It's very difficult to do that.
You talked about the 15% attrition rate.
Yes, so we've talked about that and where we compare. Again, I think our benefits package, our salary is commensurate, and we're doing a very good job. Where we are, we sit a little bit above some of our comparable neighbors in terms of bringing people in. One of the questions is, has the new series helped us or hurt in that perspective? It didn't change the entry level where they come in. Has it helped us as a recruiting tool? I think it's too early to tell, but I think it's part of our overall package of career development that we've created. We have a 5-step career within the call taker dispatcher, and beyond that, we have created a situation in the county where we have places to go within the communication center and still contribute, and that's in our quality assurance teams, our training teams, our IT teams. So, and then plus plenty of opportunities to advance vertically into supervision and management. And I think that's what sets us apart from some of the smaller centers in our area. In terms of the dispatch times, I kind of moved to question 7. Why we were seeing a slightly smaller time or slower dispatch times. And you'll notice, the big increase was in 2017, and it's not surprising. That's when we implemented P1 CAD. So the learning curve that went with that has a lot to do with that. When you implement a new CAD system, you're looking at an 18-month to 3-year learning curve before people are really comfortable with it. Not only operating it, but the people that are supporting it are learning along the way, finding out, hey, the way we provisioned it or set it up or configured it, there's actually a better way. So I know that on the police side and also on the fire side, we're continuing to tweak that and find better ways so that we can shave seconds off. And so what you're seeing is, as in 2018, you're seeing a result of those efforts to bring those back down. Are we all the way down where we were with 2016? We're not. But the other factor that goes into that is what I mentioned earlier. It's the relatively junior nature of our staff. So, and again, with a majority of employees less than 5 years, they still have competencies that they can improve upon.
All right, so to that, this is on an average.
Yes.
But I would assume that there are times that somebody has to stay on the line while the first responder's getting there. I mean,
Right.
A child calls and you say, just stay with. And so, and that, if you're on the line with that person for a half an hour, whatever time frame it is, that's certainly going to move up your average.
Well, yes, what these times represent, so I just want to be clear what these times represent. The time to process the call is the time it takes from the time the call taker picks up the call till the time they send it to dispatch. It doesn't mean they hang up. They're continuing their triage process. They may be on the phone for another minute, or in the case that you're referring to, Mr. Katz, they could be on the phone for another 10 or 15 minutes. They may be providing pre-arrival. They may be providing, CPR, maybe childbirthing instructions. It may be a situation where it's a residential burglary where they're staying on the line with a person who's hiding in a closet.
Right.
Till help gets there. So that time represents how long it takes us so that we can get first responders started.
So it's a little, it doesn't always, it's not representing exactly what the I
That's
mean,
right. It's
yeah,
not- it's
I
not
mean, it's not,
representative
it's
of
not.
the workload.
Right, it's not saying that the police aren't on the way or the fire department's on the way. It's saying how long you're staying with them, right?
And then the average time for the dispatcher to dispatch it, that's the time from the time it appears on their screen till the time they're able to send the first units. So that 57 seconds, that's that time marker that we're measuring. And that's, building the recommendation, getting the available units. In our case, on the police side, we tend to read it out to them and then push the button, which sets the timer, as opposed to doing it the other way around.
And I'm assuming there's a protocol for the questions and whatnot. Do you examine that from time to time to make sure that we're asking the right question in the most efficient way and all that?
So the protocols that we use, EPD for police, EMD, emergency medical for medical, and emergency fire dispatch for fire, those are national-based protocols that come with certain liability protections. We have input as users of those software. We are part of their user community, and we have input back to them to ask them to adjust, change, consider other things when building those protocols. The medical protocols, are 20, 25 years old at this point.
Yeah, John Kinsley from Fire and Rescue. We've been using the emergency medical dispatch protocol for that long, 20 years or so now. It's actually older than that nationwide. We have a great working relationship with a vendor between our staff and our medical director, and we've actually recognized many changes that are needed in that protocol, so have suggested them up to the vendor, and the vendor has changed them in the next version of the software, which again goes out. It's an international protocol, so if you're using this vendor's product in Japan, it's the same as what we're using here in Montgomery County. So we've had good luck at inputting changes and making it speed up.
The fire and police protocols are much younger in their age cycle than the medical. Police is the youngest. It's been around less than 5 years. And so there is still a maturity process going on with it and a number of refinements that are being suggested across the country.
Because I would think that's what causes most people to be anxious. I mean, here, you're asking me what I need a police officer right now. You keep asking me these questions, but you're obviously doing something while you're asking the questions as well.
That's right.
Yeah.
And because we operate in a vertical system, what I mean by that is the separate call taker from dispatcher. You'll see in smaller centers or on TV, you go back to the early days of Rescue 911 back in the 1970s.
Right, yeah.
They'd show one person doing all the jobs at once. That is not our paradigm. So the call taker does their job, gets it over to dispatch, so the dispatcher can do their job, but the call taker's job continues. And part of that triage process and this protocol process is to reassure the caller, okay, I've sent help, but I still need to ask you some more questions for your safety and the responder safety. I will point out that of that, in the call taking process, that on the police side, we look specifically at EPD versus, which is 142 seconds on average for a priority call. The protocol system timestamps when the call taker starts that protocol and when they send it to dispatch. Taking the delta from that, the difference between that and that time and the overall time that we get from CAD. What we learn and what we know from that is the call taker is spending in excess of 1 minute, between 1 minute and 1 minute and 10 seconds, just verifying the address, getting the address right. It's the most important part that there is, but because of cell phones and the lack of accuracy that come with cell phones, we spend a lot of time figuring out where people are because generally they don't. There was a wonderful article It's in the paper today, oh, I'm sorry, on the radio, on WTOP, outlining a rescue that took place over the weekend, one of their reporters. And he is an avid outdoorsman, and he talks about, he was actually personally involved, and the most important thing he knew that they needed was location. So, and he knew exactly where he was in the middle of a park, which is very rare. Where are we seeing improvements on that? The FCC, through their efforts and working with the carriers, we're seeing a transition from traditional way that they've done locating of callers to new technologies like device-based hybrid technologies, so that the argument we've heard and we've been making publicly is, how come if Uber and the pizza delivery guy and all these people can tell where I am, how come 911 can't?
Right.
Well, the technologies that allow those other processes to know where you are now being incorporated into the 911 system. So we should start over the next year, start to see large improvements in location.
Good. Okay. Anything else? Any other questions?
HVAC.
Yes, are you going to fix the HVAC? Please identify yourself, Mr.
Greg Ossent, Department of General Services. Susan referenced the current CIP earlier. It's about $17.5 million. Just to break that down for you, 14.5 of it was for the acquisition of the property. So we now own the building and the property. And the remaining 3 was devoted to plan and design and replacement of the equipment. And you've received an update on the replacement that's ongoing. We still have quite because we were able to do the planning and design work as part of that first phase, the replacement work is, there's an additional list of replacements that need to occur. Some of it's HVAC, some of it's battery related, and some of it's other stuff. So we fully anticipate submitting that at some point in the future. Really, right now we are taking that list, and of course, now that we own the building and have made that commitment for the long term, we expect that list to get a little bit longer. And so right now we're prioritizing based on critical mechanical systems and other things that operationally 911 needs and will need into the future. And as the consolidation continues, we'll put all that together, and then I would suspect be submitted as part of a future CIP request.
Okay. Any other questions? No. Thank you all very, very much for the update. I know you you work under a lot of stress. Did you have something? Go ahead.
Just one thing.
Sure.
If I could. I'd be remiss if I didn't do this. So next week, I'll have 35 years here with the county. Wow. Got to tell you, just in this is my new assignment, relatively new over the past year, you'd be hard-pressed to find better collaboration amongst the 3 agencies represented at this table. Wow. If you took a snapshot of it, it really is, and this isn't because Russ Hamill's in this group. I'm probably the detraction in it. But you'd be this is the how-to for other agencies in working together. And yes, there's going to be differences. There's going to be differences of opinion. There's going to be differences in methods to get things done. But working through them, and we throw collaboration around quite a bit. You'd be hard-pressed to find better collaboration amongst agencies to get what needs to be done for the community.
That's great.
And these gentlemen all sitting to my right, this is an example of how to do it. I'm proud to work with.
Well, and basically you took the words out of my mouth. And not only all of what you just said, but the people who are actually doing the work. We sincerely appreciate it. I know you never get a thank you when somebody is, at wit's end when they need you, but thank you very much for what you do.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I guess that concludes our meeting. Bum-bing.